In this video, we are going to talk about pattern rules and how we write pattern rules. So when I talk about a pattern rule, I mean finding a pattern in numbers. So here's an example. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Now what's the pattern? Well, in order to find the pattern, what I should do is I should find, how did I get from 1 to 3? What did we do to get from 1 to 3? Well, we added 2. And what about to get from 3 to 5? What did we do? Well, again, we added 2. And from 5 to 7, we added 2. And from 7 to 9, we added 2. So what you're seeing is that we add 2 each time to our pattern. So this is how we'd write our pattern. We start at 1. We always say where we have to start our pattern. We start at 1. And then what do? We add 2 each time. And that's important to remember, to do that each time. Let's do another example. So here's a pattern. 6, 10, 14, 18, 22. So in order to find out what the pattern rule is, we have to know, what are we doing between each number? How do we get from one number to the next? Well, to get from this 6 to this 10, what did I do? I added 4. And to get from the 10 to the 14, I added 4. And the 14 to the 18, guess what? I added 4. And if you're ever not too sure, you might do some margin work. So I might say, 18 minus 14 equals 4. So that's how I know I added 4. Excellent. And from 18 to 22, I added 4. So what we can say is that in this pattern, we start at 6 and we add 4 each time. Two really important things in this pattern rule. Always tell me, where do you start? Because if you said start at 8, that wouldn't be right, would it? Because it would go 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, and so on. So you have to explain where to start, and you have to say what we do, add 4, each time. That's really important. Because if you just say add 4, and you didn't write each time, start at 6, add 4, this is what your pattern would look like. 6, 10, and then you'd stop. But by saying each time, you keep going over and over. Add 4 each time, so over and over and over again. Here's another pattern. 19, 16, 13, 10, 7. So what are we doing? What's the pattern rule? Well, I have to find out, what am I doing between each number? How do I get from 19 to 16 and 16 to 13 and so on? What I like to do is write numbers in between that tell me what I'm doing. So to get from 19 to 16, I subtracted 3. And if you're not sure about that, what you can do is you can do some margin work where you take one number in the pattern and you subtract the next number in the pattern, and that should give you the answer. And the answer here is 3. So we're subtracting 3 each time. From 16 to 13, I subtract 3. And 13 to 10, I subtract 3. And from 10 to 7, I subtract 3. So you can see that I'm subtracting 3 each time. So my pattern rule is going to be start at 19, subtract 3 each time. Again, please remember, tell me where to start. That's really important. And also, don't forget to tell me what to do each time. Let's look at a few more patterns. So we've looked at adding patterns, and we've looked at subtracting patterns. Now we're going to look at a different one that's called an alternate pattern. Alternate pattern. Here's a pattern to look at. 6, 8, 9, 11, 12, 14. Okay. So remember, let's find out, how do we get from one number to the next? So from 6 to 8, what did we do? Well, I know that we add 2 to get from 6 to 8. How do we get from 8 to 9? We add 1. Well, that's different from adding 2. Interesting. Let's keep going. How do you get from 9 to 11? You add 2. How do you get from 11 to 12? You add 1. And 12 to 14? You add 2. So look at this pattern. It goes add 2, add 1. Add 2, add 1. Add 2. What would come next, do you think? Probably add 1. Right. This is called an alternating pattern. It alternates. What alternate means is you go between one number and the next. So you add 2, then you add 1. Then you add 2, then you add 1. And you take turns going back and forth between two numbers. So for this pattern, we would write start at 6, alternate by adding 2, comma, then adding 1 each time. Wow, that's an important rule. So notice that I told you where to start. We start at 6. There it is. We start at 6. And then we alternate by adding 2. So we start by adding 2 right there. Then adding 1 each time. So by alternating, we add 2, then 1. Add 2, add 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 1. Back and forth. Let's do another example. Are you ready for this pattern? 7, 10, 8, 11, 9, 12. Alright, well let's find out what's happening. You notice I write my numbers in between what happens. You should do the same thing. So from 7 to 10, I know that I added 3. It's always a good idea to write your numbers in, because then you can see the pattern instead of trying to keep it all jumbled in your head where it might be a little more confusing. Alright, how did I get from 10 to 8? Well, to go from 10 to 8, I know that you subtract 2. And to go from 8 to 11, we add 3. And from 11 to 9, we subtract 2. And from 9 to 12, we add 3. Wow, interesting. So this again is an alternating pattern. So I write the pattern rule like this. I tell you where to start. Start at 7. Alternate by doing what? Well, first by adding 3, because that's the first thing we did right here. Then subtract 2 each time. And there you have it. That's an alternating pattern. This last pattern I want to show you has a very special rule as well. So let's take a look at it. 1, 2, 4, 7, 11, 16. Alright, so first of all, let's find out how do we get from one number to the next. Well, to get from 1 to 2, we added 1. And from 2 to 4, we add 2. And from 4 to 7, remember, if you're not sure, do some margin work. We added 3. And from 7 to 11, we added 4. And from 11 to 16, we added 5. Okay, take a look at those numbers. We start by adding 1. Then we add 2. Then we add 3. Then we add 4. Then we add 5. Do you see a pattern there? This is how we'd write that special pattern rule. We always begin by telling you where to start. So what number did we start at? We started at 1. Then what did we do? Well, what we did was we then added 1. So start at 1 and add 1, just like that. But now you'll notice that the numbers we add keep growing. They keep growing by 1. So from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, they keep growing by 1. So we write that like this. Increase the number you add by 1 each time. So I tell you where to start. Start at 1. And then I say what you have to do. You have to first add 1. That's what we did right here. Then you increase the number you add by 1 each time. So after adding 1, which is right here, after you add 1, you increase the number you add by 1 each time. So you add 1, then you add 2, then you add 3, then you add 4, then you add 5. What would you add next, do you think? You would add 6. You're right. Let's do one more example. 6, 7, 10, 15, 22. All right, let's find out what we do between each one. To go from 6 to 7, we add 1. From 7 to 10, we add 3. From 10 to 15, we add 5. And from 15 to 22, we add 7. Interesting. So this is how we'd write the pattern rule. Start at 6. We have to say where we start. And then what did we do? Well, then we add 1, because that's what we did right here. But now you'll notice that the number we add goes up by 2. So we add 1, then 3, then 5, then 7. So how we'd write that as a pattern rule is increase the number you add by 2 each time. So we start at 6. We added 1, and then we increase the number we add by 2 each time. So we add 1, then we increase that by 2 and add 3. Increase it by 2 and add 5. Increase that by 2 and add 7, and so on. And that is pattern rules. Good luck.